We're going to continue this morning. We've got our summer series, which is Stories Jesus Told, and it's from Luke's Gospel. We're looking throughout the series from Luke's Gospel, Stories Jesus Told. And today we're looking at the rich young fool. So our reading is from Luke chapter 12 and verses 13 to 21. And let's read these words together. It says, "Someone in the crowd said to him, 'Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me.' Jesus replied, 'Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?' And then he said to them, 'Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions.' And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, 'What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops.' Then he said, 'This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you, and then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray my assets, Lord, to keep. I pray my stocks are on the rise, and that my analyst is wise, that all the wine I sip is white, and my hot tub remains watertight, that racquetball won't get too tough, that all my sushi's fresh enough. I pray my mobile phone still works, that my career won't lose its perks. My microwave won't radiate, my mansion won't depreciate. I pray my health club doesn't close, and that my money market grows. If I go before I wake, if I go broke before I wake, I pray my Audi they won't take." Jesus said, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." Back in the 19th century, the end of the 19th century, there was a 350-pound wrestler, what's that, about 25-stone wrestler in Europe named Yusuf, the Terrible Turk. He was formidable. This is a picture of him. In 4 years, he was impossible to beat, holding the undisputed title as a champion of Europe. And then in 1898, he sailed to America and challenged the undefeated US champion to a match, a man named Strangler Lewis. Strangler was much smaller, weighing in at just over 200 pounds. That's about 14 stone. But he would defeat his opponents, many of whom were much larger by getting behind them, putting his massive arm around their neck and cutting off their oxygen supply. And when his opponents passed out, he pinned them to the floor and won the match. When Strangler met Yusuf, he faced a problem. Yusuf didn't really have a neck. One commentator noted that Yusuf's body went from his head to his massive shoulders with very little in between. Therefore, Strangler Lewis couldn't get his hold, and it wasn't long that Yusuf flipped Strangler over and pinned him. After winning the championship, Yusuf, the Terrible Turk, demanded the prize money, which was $5,000, a huge amount of money in those days, but that be paid to him in gold. He wrapped the championship belt around his waist, he stuffed the gold into his belt, and he boarded the next ship back to Europe. Halfway across the Atlantic, this is a true story, by the way, halfway across the Atlantic, a storm struck, the ship began to sink. Yusuf was desperate to save his belt and all the money in it, so he refused to take it off. As he attempted to get into a lifeboat, he fell into the water, and with the weight of the gold, he literally sank like an anvil down into the water. He died. His love of money had literally destroyed him. Jesus said, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." Immediately before Jesus shares this parable, He is addressing a crowd of, we're told, thousands of people. It's at the start of Luke chapter 12. And he is telling them that if you are serious about following God, expect that it will be difficult. Expect persecution. It's a serious message. And within this setting, this man calls out. Jesus is telling people about how difficult life's going to be. And this voice from the back calls out to him, with thousands listening, interrupting Jesus, and says, will you arbitrate between me and my brother because I'm not getting my share of the estate? This is enormously rude. This is wholly inappropriate. It is thoroughly self-focused of this man who's not listening to Jesus and not aware of the rest of the crowd who do want to listen to Jesus. This man's priorities are seriously confused, which is why Jesus addresses him in this very abrupt term. Man, who appointed me a judge or arbiter between you? Jesus normally addresses people friend or my child, but here, man. It's a rough way to address someone, a rebuke to the man's misplaced priorities and his self-centeredness. And then Jesus tells a parable in response to this question. Let me read it again so we understand what it says. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. The rich man thought to himself, what shall I do? I've no place to store my crops. And then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns. I'll build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you've got plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you, and then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? What has the rich man done wrong? At first reading, the condemnation of the rich man seems very harsh. According to the passage, he hasn't mistreated his workers. He hasn't extorted or cheated people. He hasn't stolen or misappropriated funds or embezzled. We might even argue the decision to build bigger barns is a good business decision. If you want to maximize your profit, wait until the market needs your goods. Don't sell when the market is saturated. Wait until there's a strong demand and you'll get a better price. It's good business economics. Build bigger barns and sell when the price is high. Yet Jesus' condemnation is harsh. You fool. Why? To understand the parable, we need to work out what is at the heart of it. Unlike English stories, which often build up to the conclusion, the point at the end, often Jewish ways of thinking, the point is in the middle. You build up step by step in your arguments to the point which is in the middle of the story, and then you build back in reverse steps to the end of the argument. I think that is what is happening here. We have in verses 15 and 21, sort of the start and the end of the story here, statements about the dangers of greed. If we can just see the next slide. There we are. So we've got a statement here where Jesus says, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. And then verse 21, he talks then about how it will be with whoever stores and sells things up for themselves, but is not rich towards God. And then the sort of next level inserted in there, the next steps, verses 16 to 18 and verse 20, if we just put those up. So we've got this, and this is these statements here are about what there's been an abundant harvest. What will happen to the crops? And this leads us to see that in the middle of this story, and the heart of the story, is verse 19. And verse 19 says this. We can just put verse 19 up. There. This man says to himself, you've plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. The reason the man is a fool, the reason the man is condemned here in the story, is that he envisages his life without reference to God. The psalmist writes, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. And as we look at the verses around it, verses 17 to 19 particularly, that we see here that it's all about him. I'll do this, my barns, my surplus grain. This is, in his view, this is all about his work, his effort, his decision, There is no reference to God whatsoever. Frank Sinatra's words fit well with the rich man's attitude, and now the end is near. And so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear. I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I traveled each and every highway. And much more than this. I did it my way. That's this man's story. I did it my way. I did it. This is all about me. And yet, he has no thought to thank God, to serve God, to recognize God's part in his blessing, or to use what God has given him to serve God and to honor God. He is absolutely self-absorbed, self-congratulatory, self-focused. It is these things that warrant this strong criticism. You fool. In verse 17, he talks about my crops. So there's no recognition there that God has blessed him with this. And no recognition of probably all the workers that have worked hard to get those crops in, to make them happen. The man has no thought of God, entirely focused on himself. Jesus calls him, because of this, you fool. There's a subtle play on words in this statement. Very interestingly, the words be merry and you fool have a shared root common word, and it's a word that is actually about our diaphragm. So this is quite interesting how you can root things back into this. You see, the idea of be merry has this idea. It's almost a bit like, we talk in English about breathing a sigh of relief. And about our diaphragm relaxing. We just relax, we rest, we're merry, we're light. And so that word merry actually has that idea of a diaphragm that's relaxed. Whereas the word fool means that you haven't got a diaphragm. It's a diaphragm less. In other words, you've got no life in you anymore. It's a moral statement. It's not about intellect. It's about your moral statement, particularly about your relationship with God. Remember, it is God who breathes his life into us. A fool is one who doesn't have the life of God within him. In verse 20, God says to the rich man, your life will be demanded from you. This word means that it is time to repay what God has given you. The idea of sort of repaying a loan. Your life will be demanded from you. You will have to repay what God has entrusted to you. Now's the time. You're called to give an account. You see, we have been given our lives by God. He breathes his life into us. It is in him. We had it before. Beast shared it, didn't you, in our worship. In him we live and we move and we have our being. God blesses us, and we are to use the life he breathes into us to bless him and to help others. And it is because this man has no concern for God or for others that God says, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? So this parable is a warning, not to live our lives without reference to God, but to remember him always, to serve him at all times, to recognize that all good gifts come from God, and to repay him for the blessings that he has entrusted to us. So let me suggest 3 responses. Firstly, I encourage you to regard everything you have as having come from God. Everything you have as well is to be used to honor God. Everything, not just part of it, but everything. There are some of us here who tithe. I would recommend tithing. We give 10% of the money we earn, and we give it over to the church and to others in order to bless other people. It's a really good spiritual discipline. Don't wait till you've got enough money to tithe, because if you don't do it when you've not got very much money, you won't do it when you have a lot of money. It's a really good thing for us to actually give part of what we have away. The problem, though, is that if you are used to tithing and you do tithe, the danger is that we give 10% away and we then think the other 90% is mine to do what I want, and we've missed the point. The point of the tithe is to remind us that everything comes from God and everything is for God. And so it's a token, but actually the whole of our 100% of what we have is for God, including the 90% that we don't give away. We are to think of that as things that God has blessed us with, in which we are to use to bless others. And then secondly, and I wonder if there are some of us here today that maybe we need to stop building bigger barns. The problem is some of us look at the barns that we have and we think we're okay. We've got big enough barns. We built these barns. We're fine. We don't need God in the future. We can look after ourselves. We don't need any help. We can do it. We're just like the man in the story. And by barns, I mean things such as property, savings, pension funds. And we feel we're sorted. Our barns mean that we forget that we still rely on God. It is his breath that breathes into us constantly. That's the danger of having big barns. And maybe for some of us, maybe we need to actually reduce the size of our barns, get rid of some of those barns so we recognize our reliance on God. God says, "You fool, don't think your life depends on your ability to look after yourself. Remember, your life is a gift from God. Every breath, every diaphragm movement comes from God." 4th century theologian Augustine, he said about this parable, he says, "The rich man didn't realize that the bellies of the poor were much safer storerooms than barns." You know, if we want to invest what God has given to us in a better place, give it away. Give it to people who desperately need it. Are our barns too big? Do we feel self-reliant that we don't need God? Maybe we need to reduce the size of our barns and to use what he's given to us to bless others. And then thirdly and finally, let me say this, because this story has this idea, don't leave it too late. Don't leave it till tomorrow to sort this out. Don't think I'll sort it out when I'm older. Former minister of Westminster Chapel, R.T. Kendall, tells a sobering story from his own life. This is what he writes. He says, "I used to have a job delivering newspapers. One day at the end of my paper round, I arrived home, and my mother came rushing out to meet me. 'Have you heard about Patsy?' she asked. I replied, 'No.' She said, 'Oh, it's awful. She's just been killed.' Patsy was a 16-year-old girl. Only the day before, during a church service, the visiting preacher had said, 'I cannot end the service without telling you that I believe there is someone here whom God is calling to himself. I believe this is the last call this person will ever receive.' It was a very dangerous thing to say, but he was an 80-year-old man who was well respected. When he spoke these words, Patsy had scoffed. My mother had watched her during the service and said, 'I watched her chewing her gum and laughing.' Eventually, she left the building and was angry. The next day, when she was walking, a car careered onto the pavement and killed her. Just like that, I will never forget it. To those who think they have a long time to live, God says, 'You fool.'" We might be tempted to say, "I'll sort out my relationship with God later. I'll get serious later. I'll change when I'm older." And yet, who knows, each one of us, when God will call us to himself, will we be ready? Will we be ready to pay account for the things that he has given to us, loaned to us, that we need to repay? Don't wait until tomorrow to honor God. Honor him today. Don't trust in your own barns. In fact, maybe God is asking some of us that we need to reduce the size of our barns so we can rely on him more. And don't just give a part of what you have, a tithe, 10%. Don't just give 10% of what you have. That's a great thing to do. But don't just give that. Just remember that everything you have is given to you by God and belongs to him. We use all that we have to bring him glory. In Texas, a very wealthy businessman invited his church minister to dinner. After the meal, the wealthy host led the minister to a place where they could get a good view of the surrounding area. Pointing to some oil wells, he boasted, "25 years ago, I had nothing. Now, as far as you can see, it's all mine." And then looking in the opposite direction at his sprawling fields of grain, he said, "That's also all mine." And then turning east towards huge herds of cattle, he bragged, "They're all mine." And then pointing to the west and a beautiful forest, he exclaimed, "That too is all mine." He paused, expecting the minister to compliment him on his great success. The minister, however, placed one man on his shoulder and pointed upwards with the other and said, "How much do you have in that direction?" Jesus teaches us not to store up things for ourselves, but to be rich towards God.